Hey everyone, I wanted to share some of my thoughts over the last couple weeks. I've been thinking a lot about suffering, and and the alert crowd seems to be exactly the right group to share it with. You guys tend to have a pretty good handle on suffering. So I didn't want to just say, why do we suffer? That's pretty broad, and a lot of much smarter people than me have already dealt with it and done a much better job. Maybe for this audience, I should be asking, why do we do it on purpose? Now, when I'm talking to a new recruit or someone who is planning on going through basic training, I always give the same advice, and it's how to suffer well. Because the key to overcoming in basic training is not to be tougher than the suffering, because you can't be. They'll find your limits and push past them. That's the nature of suffering. It's different for each person, but whatever your limit, once you're pushed past it, you're suffering just as deeply. And so it's folly to try and be tougher than the suffering. No, the way you overcome suffering is by submitting to it and trusting God through it. So in basic, this means to submit yourself to your drill instructor as though you were an instrument or a limb of his body that he can use in whatever way he sees fit. And then whatever pain comes to you is his responsibility. You just have to do your very best until he tells you to stop. And he knows your limits, so he's trustworthy. And that's really how I found that you get through the suffering of basic. But you guys already know this. You've all been there. We could say that that we suffer to get stronger, but while that is certainly a byproduct of suffering, I think it's a poor reason for it. And I mean, there's times where that's appropriate, but it's a short-term and self-focused reason for suffering, and I don't think that makes it. I don't think those are good things for a reason for suffering. I will say that once you've done hard things, then in the future you're able to do hard things backed by this wall of past experiences, that you've got all of the hard things you've already done as a standard of comparison, so that when you look at something new, it's not nearly as intimidating because you've done things like that before. But many of you already know this. Now, sometimes hard things come suddenly. Suffering just drops on your head, and there's no warning, there's no preparation, no choice to go into it. Sometimes having that background of suffering lets you make those hard choices and choose things that you know are right that would otherwise be harder, but sometimes it just drops on you. And in those situations, instead of being, oh no, now what am I gonna do? This is so strange and dangerous and unfamiliar. It's just, oh, this again. And you settle right back into the trust, the submission, and the acceptance to let it shape you. But some of you already know this. Here's the one that was new to me. First of all, I am not much of an evangelist. I really am not. I love talking about Jesus. I tell people about God's goodness all the time whenever I can, and they will listen. I love it. But I'm a teacher. I explain things really well. But then people are like, oh, that's interesting. and they file that information away to be remembered, possibly never. Data doesn't really change hearts. But when a man with a mortal disease says, "Look what my God has done for me," people freaking listen. Holy smokes. Let me tell you, and I've been telling everyone who will hear, just what it took for God to set this up 18 months in advance so that this disease could be detected before I even became systematic. He had to set it up a year and a half in advance. It took a great deal of suffering to do it. He really twisted my arm, and my goodness, it was his handiwork start to finish. And I've been telling everyone. I have a nurse named Jade. I have no reason, like zero reason, to believe that she comes from any sort of a Judeo-Christian background. At one point during our conversation, she was saying prayer is strong. As you know, we were talking about prayer, and I almost agreed with her. But then I said, no, I think it depends on who you're praying to. My God is strong. And I told her what my God has done for me and how he's brought me to this point. And by the end of that conversation, this gal, who I don't know if she knows anything about God other than what she saw from me, but she looked at me and said, "Your God is strong." I think we learn to suffer so that we can suffer well. Paul once said that he felt like he had been put on display, that he was chained to Christ's victory chariot in a parade with the entire world mocking him to the glory of Christ. I think we suffer so that Jesus can hang us up in a window, so that Jesus can shine through us and people can see him and they notice. I think we suffer so that we can suffer well, because that brings God